And we are live. Excuse me. This is Black Tower Radio. I am your host, Jake Fox. And we are broadcasting on 1040 AM, 92.1 FM, WYSL in Rochester, New York. Also on worldnewsradio.today. That's worldnewsradio.today. And we are joined today by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. He's a former editor of the Wall Street Journal. He's been a professor of economics at Georgetown University. He is the creator of Reaganomics. He's pretty much done and touched everything that, that involved your life for the last 30 years. He's a highly influential guy, and we're very pleased to have him back again on the show. Welcome back, Dr. Roberts.
Thank you, Jake.
Okay, so, Dr. Roberts, we are, I don't know, I'd like to jump into a little geopolitical discussion, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. We're in a very, very, very volatile situation with Russia. We have presidential candidates talking about a no-fly zone over Syria, namely Hillary Clinton. It seems Obama is dragging his feet on that a little bit because he understands what that would mean. It's getting very dangerous over there. It seems we are on they're talking about openly cyber attacking Russia. It's escalating to a very weird point. It seems we're on the precipice of something very big here. What's your take on it, Dr. Roberts?
Well, Jake, what we see happening is the frustrations of the neoconservatives whose ideology of United States world hegemony, that is U.S. unilateral control over the world, has been breached by the Russians and the Chinese. And so they're frustrated, and because they fervently believe, they're like fanatics, that the collapse of the Soviet Union gave the rest of the world to the United States as its empire. And at the time, they formulated the new foreign policy doctrine of the United States, which says that the principal goal of American foreign policy is to prevent the rise of any other country that could serve as a check on American unilateral action. And so while they were wasting 15 years in the Middle East, blowing up women and children and kids' soccer games, funerals, weddings, the Russians made clear that they weren't going to put up with us. And so they're frustrated about that, and they're also frustrated by the Chinese standing up to us. But they have enormous hubris and arrogance, and the frustration is leading to excessive demonstrations of hubris and arrogance, such that they're actually threatening nuclear powers that could wipe us off the face of the earth in 30 minutes. So it is an extremely serious situation. It's even more serious because the entirety of the American establishment is determined to put Hillary Clinton in the White House, and she is completely allied with neoconservatives and has actually herself threatened Russia with military action and has declared the president of Russia, who's democratically elected and has voter support far higher than anything any Western leader has ever had, including Ronald Reagan. And she's called this guy the new Hitler, a dictator. So it's a very serious situation. If Hillary becomes president, either from the stupidity of the American people or from vote fraud or whatever, we face serious conflict with Russia and China. You have to remember that Hillary, I think, was the one who announced that the South China Sea was an area of American national interest. Well, that's kind of like China announcing that the Gulf of Mexico is an area of Chinese national interest, or the seacoast off of New York or California. I mean, you know, it's absurd. And so when you have this kind of arrogance that doesn't see any limits, you have the potential of conflict. So we should all keep in mind that the conflict would likely be nuclear, and that the modern weapons are 1,700 times more powerful than the ones we used on Japan. And so essentially life on Earth ends. So Jake, the question of this election is not whether Trump gropes women or speaks lewdly about women. The question is whether we're going to get in the Oval Office somebody who doesn't want conflict with Russia, which Trump says he does not see the point of it, or we're going to get somebody like Hillary who's already threatened them. Now, from my long experience in the government and just my general education, it's insane to convince a nuclear power that you're going to attack them. But that's what we're doing to Russia. We're convincing them that we're going to attack them. We've got anti-ABM missile systems on their border to allegedly negate their retaliatory strategic weapons. We're putting all kinds of NATO bases, tanks, troops on their border. I mean, this hasn't been done since Nazi Germany. And that's the way the Russians look at it. And the other day, a high-ranking Russian announced something that was really quite a scary message. He said, Russia will never again fight a war on her own territory. If there's a NATO incursion of Russia, we will punish NATO. What he means is they're going to drop nukes all over them. It's going to be the end of Europe. And if we stick our nose in it, we're gone too. So this is the situation that we face, and this was created. It began with the Bill Clinton administration, when they broke all the agreements that Reagan had made with Gorbachev and that George Herbert Walker Bush and Secretary of State Jim Baker had made with Gorbachev, and moved NATO to Russia's borders. This was a complete violation of the word of the United States government. And then we had George W. Bush pull out of the ABM treaty and start maneuvering to put ABM missiles on Russia's border. And then we had the change in American war doctrine under the Bush regime, George W. Bush, which moved nuclear weapons from a retaliatory weapon to nuclear first strike, preemptive first strike. And this is telling the Russians, hey, we're going to nuke you in order to get rid of you. And now we've got this idiot Obama and this idiot Hillary Clinton making all kinds of provocative threats against Russia. This is madness. This really is madness. I mean, this is insane. And this is what really is at stake. If Trump's elected, assuming we can believe him, I mean, who knows? He says he doesn't see the point of conflict with Russia. He doesn't see the point of NATO. Well, of course, he's right. NATO should have ceased to exist when the Soviet Union did. But it's become an auxiliary force for Washington, you know. It's our mercenaries. I mean, right now, there are many Italian troops fighting for us in the Middle East. Can you believe that? And the Air Force of Norway or Denmark, I forget which, and the UK and Australia, we're using in Syria. I mean, this is madness. So NATO no longer exists as a guard against the Red Army overrunning Europe. It's become a mercenary vassal army, like the ancient Persians had, that they tried to use against the Greeks, that we use against the rest of the world. And it shows then that the entirety of the Western world hasn't any conception of the danger it's bringing to itself by provoking nuclear powers, Russia and China, either one of which can wipe Europe or the United States off the face of the earth in 30 minutes. So the American people, if they think that what Trump says about women is important, they're crazy. They're out of their minds. What's important is that we get somebody in the Oval Office that calms down the tensions that have been building now, let's see, since Clinton, that's 8 years, George W. Bush, another 8, Obama, another 8, 3 8, 24. For 24 years, we've been elevating the tensions. And this is unprecedented in world history. It just shows how low-key the Russians are, how confident they are, how much they'll put up with. But at some point, if you convince them that they're going to have a preemptive nuclear attack made upon them, the same with China, they're not going to sit there and wait for it. And so what we're witnessing is the complete, total failure, not only of the United States government, but of all of the Western countries that enable this insane behavior. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Japanese vassal state, Great Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and then all of Eastern Europe, the Baltic states, Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, Hungary, Bulgaria. These people are enabling the conception in the Russian mind that they're going to be attacked. Now, the Russian weapon systems are far more modern and superior to ours. So there's none of this stuff about, oh, well, this stuff won't work. We're so good. We're capitalists, blah, blah. So we're really on the verge of a really serious situation. If Hillary gets in there, in fact, every effort will be made by the oligarchic establishment and their prostitutes in the media to put her there. We're going to be faced with the Third World War.
What's amazing to me about what you just said, and I've been remarking upon it the last couple of weeks. Russia has recalled all of their students from studying overseas in the United States. They recalled their entire staff from the embassy in London, and I just read right now on Zero Hedge that Norway's surveillance photos show Russian aircraft carrier flotilla en route to Syria. Meanwhile, the American public, and I don't know what's going on in Europe, but I know that the American public have no idea that any of this is going on. They have no idea how dangerous of a situation this is. Everyone's going about their business. No one cares that Hillary wants to put a no-fly zone over Syria that could potentially trigger World War III, and everyone thinks everything's pretty cool. But we're in a very dangerous situation. We're completely blind. I mean, the American public, I don't know if the media is purposely shielding the American public from this, or the election is just taking all the oxygen out of the room information-wise. But Russia is really preparing for something right now, and the Russian people, are well aware of what's going on.
Well, Jake, your program apparently tries to inform Americans. I don't know how you get away with it, or why you haven't been closed down. But the networks aren't permitted, and NPR is not permitted, and the Washington Post and New York Times are not permitted. So I don't know how you survive, whether you got some kind of independent station that's not owned by the 6 mega media corporations, or whether they think you're so far away in Rochester, New York, that it doesn't matter. I don't know what they think, but you're not the kind of news guy that they tolerate. So some kind of information can get out through you, which is why I always accept your invitations. But I think, Jake, that those reports about the Russians calling people home aren't true. Because the Russians wouldn't send a signal like that. I studied them for years, and my first book was about them. And I've been there, and many times. They're not going to send a signal like that. That's what you do when you. That's the old days, the old time, because they realize the stakes are so high that a few students and a few embassy dependents are not, or the entire country. So I don't think those reports are correct, but nevertheless, the point of those reports is correct, that the Russians are and have lost all confidence in the United States government. They have zero confidence in everybody in Washington. And of course, if Hillary's elected, I think they regard her as Adolf Hitler. And as the high-ranking Russian said, I can't remember his name, but I wrote about it. It's on my website, paulcraigroberts.org. He said, Russia will never again fight a war on her own territory. In other words, we're going to blow you off the face of the earth. So, in that sense, you're right. It's dangerous. But I think, on the whole, the Russians don't want a war. They've done everything to avoid it. They keep relying on diplomacy, even though they know that the United States only believes in force and does not believe in diplomacy, and never keeps any agreement, whether Syrian or Ukrainian or the ones that the that the United States government made to them about NATO and the rest. They know that the United States breaks every agreement, and yet they continue to act diplomatically. Let's resolve the Syrian crisis. Let's fight ISIS together. So I don't think they want a war, but I think that they've caught on that they have to watch us very closely, and I don't think they'll be caught off guard. And so we're back to the point that I made earlier, that they simply don't trust us, and we are convincing them that we're going to attack them. So that's insane. Look, I can tell you, you and your audience, this. During the many years I was in Washington, there were many instances in which both the United States and the Soviets received information about incoming ICBMs that was a mistake. But because both sides were working to reduce tensions, nobody believed the information, and so nobody pushed a button. There were hundreds of these things. Now, when you create tensions that exist today, and you get some kind of mistaken reading of incoming missiles, you have a much higher likelihood of pushing a button. So the chance of nuclear war just by accident is so much higher when one side is cultivating tensions with the other than during the Cold War when both sides were trying to reduce tensions. Once again, remember, Kennedy worked with Khrushchev behind the scenes to defuse the Cuban Missile Crisis. Nixon had SALT I, the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty I. He had the anti-ABM treaty so that nobody could negate the other side's retaliatory forces. Carter had SALT II. Reagan went to Reykjavik with Gorbachev to negotiate the end of the Cold War. The George Herbert Walker Bush administration gave the Russians gave the Soviets ironclad assurances that if they permitted the reunification of Germany, there would be no movement to the east of NATO. And then the Clinton bastard put NATO on the Russian borders. So if you're a Russian and you say, look, we did everything, we kept all the agreements, and look what you've done. And now you threaten us every day. Every day there's more false accusations. We hacked Hillary's emails. We did this, we did that, blah, blah, blah. The Russians know it's false, even if the Americans don't know. Even if the stupid people sitting in front of the CNN doesn't realize it. The Russians know it's false. They're sitting there and they listen to all these lies about them. And they say, what does this mean? It means the bastards are preparing their public to accept an attack on us. This is what's serious. It's extremely serious. You have to remember, the Russians suffered tremendously from World War II. I mean, they defeated the Nazis. I mean, we had almost nothing to do with it. By the time we got in the war, the Russians were on the German border. So they know that the whole experience of the West has been awful. Napoleon, Hitler, Truman broke every agreement he made with Stalin once he had the atomic bomb. And now, in the post-Soviet era, every agreement broken, shattered. Everything they agreed to, we broke. So they sit there looking at this, and they say, what's next? How how much risk can we take? And this is a powerful military country. I mean, it's far more powerful than the United States. I mean, we've got a bunch of old-fashioned, outmoded aircraft carriers. I mean, even the Chinese can take those out. Our weapon systems are so inferior because they exist in order to make profits for the military security complex. There's endless cost overruns. You know, you can almost equip the entire Russian Air Force with the cost of one of these new American jet fighters, and which are no good. They can't even compete with the old fighters. What is it, the F-35? The thing can't even compete with the F-15. Against the Russians, you might as well have a World War II biplane, a World War I biplane up there. So this isn't something that we have control over. I mean, it's not like the British facing tribal countries in the 19th century, Africa or something, you know. We're facing a military power that's superior to ours. And we're provoking them. We just keep provoking. We keep issuing threats. We keep saying more aggressive things. This is madness. And you're right, the American people, they don't have the foggiest idea. They've got some idea, though, Jake, because, you know, despite the media attack on Trump, he won the Republican nomination. And despite the media attack on Bernie Sanders, he won the Democratic nomination, which is stolen from him. I don't think the media attack on Trump now is working. I don't believe the polls. They're part of the propaganda to try to convince Trump people not to bother to vote because he's already lost. I just don't see how we can get out of this if Hillary's president, because she's a neocon captive. You know, she's the idiot that appointed that Victoria Nuland that caused the coup and revolution in Ukraine in an effort to grab the Russian naval base in Crimea. Now, anybody that would do that has no judgment. None. Zero judgment. This is beyond insanity. This is something hyper times worse. So if we get that person in the White House, it seems to me the world's doomed.
I just read today in the Daily Beast that former Defense Secretary Robert Gates was against the action in Libya because Hillary Clinton had no contingency plan. She had no real plan at all for Libya. She told him they wanted to play it by ear after they initiated the action. And he was like, "Whoa, this is crazy," and I'm not for this. I mean, this is the type of person she is. She's very sloppy. She's constantly embroiled in scandal and I mean, to be quite frank, policy failures everywhere. It's just I can't even imagine what an escalating situation with Russia would look like. I mean, it would be embarrassing for the United States to see. You know, we'd be very disorganized in that situation, I would imagine. I'd also imagine there would be a lot of laws being broken in the lead up to whatever happened with Russia and whatever in the aftermath scandal after the fact would be probably pretty big. But yeah, she's a very dangerous and I would say incompetent person. Colin Powell's emails, his email comment said it all to me when he said, "I would rather not vote for Hillary. She's greedy, and everything she touches turns into a disaster." I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. Dr. Roberts, what do you see economically what would happen under a President Clinton administration?
Well, she's owned by the mega banks and Wall Street, so under her, the subsidies to the 1% would continue, and the rest of us would be driven further down. And of course, we would be blamed for it. We'd be blamed. We would say, "Oh, we're lazy. We won't work." We would be said that we won't buy our own medical insurance. We'd rather drink beer. You know, don't you remember what she said the other day? It came out, I think, in the emails, where she said, "I'm so rich now, I have no concept of the ordinary American." Didn't you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. "I'm so rich now, I have no concept of the ordinary American." So she wants to be the president. 99% of Americans are the ordinary Americans. So she wants to be the president of the 1%. And they're the ones who made them rich. Look, if you give 3 20-minute speeches to Goldman Sachs and they give you $675,000, do you think they gave you that money for the wisdom you imparted?
Well, that's a bribe.
It's not even a bribe. It's just a payment. Okay, we own you. Here's your stipend. Get on about our work. Bill Clinton was dirt poor. So was Hillary. They don't pay the president enough to be rich. What do they pay him? It used to be $200,000. I think it's $400,000 a year. An upper middle class income. It's not a rich income. $400,000 a year is an upper middle class income. And they're worth $120 million. Where'd that come from? The foundation has got $1,600 million in it. Where'd this come from? They're owned. They belong to the 1%. They belong to oligarchy. They are the agents of the oligarchs. They don't have anything to do with American people. And they have all these organizations, all these fake organizations they created with paid people to go out and advocate for them. You hear them all day long on NPR, National Public Radio. That's all National Public Radio does. It just has all these fake organizations, and these women come up and say, "Oh, I got to vote for Hillary. I might get groped by Trump." I mean, it's so silly. It's so stupid. But it's everywhere. So that's America today. The whole question is whether the American people are able to see what's happening to them.
What about the increase in arms sales to foundation donors? I mean, they were holding galas just so these people can.
We don't even need to bother with that. Yeah, sure. This is where the $1,600 million of the foundation came from foreign interests that they served. But we can get into all these. We can go on and on about all their crooked things. But the real issue, Jake, is: are we going to end up in a war with Russia? That's the issue. Trump says no. I can work it out. Hillary says he's a new Hitler. Well, do you think she's going to make a deal with a new Hitler? No. So the only real issue is, are we going to be brought into a war with Russia? And that means also with China, because they now have a strategic alliance. The United States, after 15 years, has been unable to conquer a few 50,000 lightly armed Taliban in Afghanistan. And it's going to take on Russia and China. What a joke. What a joke. This is an absurdity. What kind of arrogance and hubris gets a person so out of reality as to think that? It's 13 years after Iraq. The place is absolute chaos. ISIL, the most powerful force in Iraq. And we're going to take on Russia and China. I mean, Americans really should wake up. They should, what is this? What are they talking about? Do you know just the geographic size of Russia? If they didn't even fight us, we couldn't invade it. It's so big. You couldn't occupy it. There's not enough people in the entirety of the West to occupy Russia. China, 4 times our population. And both of these countries have modern militaries, modern weapons. They can take us out. They have superior weapon systems. Do Americans know that the only reason we have a space program is that the Russians sell us the rockets? That we can't get there on our own? No, they don't know that because the media doesn't tell them. But that is a fact. The American space program is based on the Russians selling us their rockets. And so we're going to go to war, people. It's kind of like some primitive third world state going to the war with a superpower. And this is Hillary. Oh, I'm so powerful. Americans so powerful. The other day she gave a speech. She said, I want every young American boy and girl to understand America is a great country. We are the greatest. What are we great about? For 15 years we've been slaughtering Muslims. Millions of them. There's so many of them slaughtered they're now overrunning all of Europe. Refugees from our wars. Oh, we're so great. We blow up weddings and funerals and kids' soccer games and aid workers. Aren't we great? But we can't pacify a few thousand lightly armed Taliban. And after 5 years, we can't do anything about ISIL. It's up to the Russians. It takes them only a few minutes. After 5 years, we couldn't do anything. So there you have it, Jake. The country is absurd. The United States is absurd. Now, it's leadership. And the question is, do the people accept this? Do they want to be the captives of the oligarchs, the 1%, the media, who are prostitutes? You know what this word prostitute is, right? It's the contraction of press, prostitute. The entirety of the American print and TV media are prostitutes. They're a bunch of whores. They lie for a living. They're paid to lie. I bet you every one of them, after they go out and lie for Hillary this whole time, they'll go out and vote against her. But they have to have a job. They got to pay their car payments, their rent, their student loans. So they lie for her, but they'll vote against her. So anyhow, I think we've covered the waterfront, Jake. I'd better quit now.
We've certainly covered a lot of information. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, thank you so much for coming on the show again today. I'd like to give you the floor to talk about any project or idea or anything. Close the show. That you have it, sir.
No, I don't. People can read my website, which is very simple, paulcraigroberts.org. They can agree or disagree, but they will certainly get information they cannot get from the Western print and TV media. And my life was in academia, government. You know, you left out that I was Assistant Secretary of the United States Treasury in charge of United States domestic economic policy. That I was appointed to a secret committee by the President of the United States to assess the CIA's assessments of Soviet economic and military capability. Wall Street Journal editor, Business Week columnist, Scripps Hollywood News Service columnist, Creative Syndicate columnist, professors. I had the William E. Simon Chair in Political Economy, Center for Strategic International Studies, Georgetown University. My colleagues were Kissinger, Brzezinski, James R. Schlesinger, Admiral Moore. I was Senior Research Fellow for 25 years, the Hoover Institution, Stanford University. I know them all. I've met them all. I've lived it. I've seen it. I've had every security clearance. We are in really deep trouble because of the arrogance of a handful of people. That's my closing remarks. Jake, all the best to you. Thanks for sharing your audience with me.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Also, I'd like to thank you for the compliment earlier. We love having you on this show. And in regards to the radio station I'm on, this is the second radio station I've been on. The first one, which you originally joined me on, was a Christian radio station. And now I'm on an independently owned radio station that's not owned by one of the big six. So they allow me to, have free speech.
Yeah, well, I figured it had to be something like that, or if you had me on, they'd fire you.
Thank you again for coming on the show, Dr. Roberts, and we'd love to obviously have you back on again in the future.
Of course. I'll look forward to next time, Jake.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
That was Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, one of the most long-time guests here we've had on Black Tower Radio. So we are going to be back with Azuri Crispino. She is the media director for the IWOC, the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, which basically helps out the prison strike, which started on September 9th, the 45th anniversary of the Attica riots. It's getting no media coverage at all, which is ridiculous. I mean, you see MSNBC, their whole weekend is filled with prison shows. I mean, they're making tons of money off all of these scary prison shows, life inside prisons, but they're not giving any coverage to this prisoner strike, probably because a lot of their sponsors make money off of slave labor in the prisons. And I'd like to add this. A lot of the police shootings you see, shooting people of color, a lot of that, in my opinion, is collateral damage from this very issue, this prison slavery industrial complex, where private prisons lobby the government for keeping harsh drug laws on the books, and it gets people caught up in the whole prison system. People of color get arrested. They go into the prison system for long periods of time, and they end up in call centers for AT&T and making products for Starbucks or Walmart for little or no pay at all. And then they get out and they're a felon and they can't get a job, and then the whole cycle continues. And that's the root of the problem, in my opinion. And it's not really being talked about by anyone, not in the media. It's these grassroots organizers like Azuri Crispino that are bringing this issue to light, and we want to bring those kind of issues to light on Black Tower Radio. So we will be right back in about 15 minutes with Azuri Crispino, so stay tuned.
The frustrations of the neoconservatives whose ideology of United States world hegemony, that is U.S. unilateral control over the world, has been breached by the Russians and the Chinese. And so they're frustrated, and because they fervently believe, they're like fanatics, that the collapse of the Soviet Union gave the rest of the world to the United States as its empire. And at the time, they formulated the new foreign policy doctrine of the United States, which says that the principal goal of American foreign policy is to prevent the rise of any other country that could serve as a check.
And we are live. Excuse me. This is Black Tower Radio. I am your host, Jake Fox. And we are broadcasting on 1040 AM, 92.1 FM, WYSL in Rochester, New York. Also on worldnewsradio.today. That's worldnewsradio.today. And we are joined today by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. He's a former editor of the Wall Street Journal. He's been a professor of economics at Georgetown University. He is the creator of Reaganomics. He's pretty much done and touched everything that, that involved your life for the last 30 years. He's a highly influential guy, and we're very pleased to have him back again on the show. Welcome back, Dr. Roberts.
Thank you, Jake.
Okay, so, Dr. Roberts, we are, I don't know, I'd like to jump into a little geopolitical discussion, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. We're in a very, very, very volatile situation with Russia. We have presidential candidates talking about a no-fly zone over Syria, namely Hillary Clinton. It seems Obama is dragging his feet on that a little bit because he understands what that would mean. It's getting very dangerous over there. It seems we are on they're talking about openly cyber attacking Russia. It's escalating to a very weird point. It seems we're on the precipice of something very big here. What's your take on it, Dr. Roberts?
Well, Jake, what we see happening is it's even more serious because the entirety of the American establishment is determined to put Hillary Clinton in the White House, and she is completely allied with neoconservatives and has actually herself threatened Russia with military action and has declared the president of Russia, who's democratically elected and has voter support far higher than anything any Western leader has ever had, including Ronald Reagan. And she's called this guy the new Hitler, a dictator. So it's a very serious situation. If Hillary becomes president, either from the stupidity of the American people or from vote fraud or whatever, we face on American unilateral action. And so while they were wasting 15 years in the Middle East, blowing up women and children and kids' soccer games, funerals, weddings, the Russians made clear that they weren't going to put up with us. And so they're frustrated about that, and they're also frustrated by the Chinese standing up to us. But they have enormous hubris and arrogance, and the frustration is leading to excessive demonstrations of hubris and arrogance, such that they're actually threatening nuclear powers that could wipe us off the face of the earth in 30 minutes. So it is an extremely serious situation.